The third most populous way to make revenue in mobile is through premium apps. For those people who don't know about Macadamian, do you have the elevator pitch about who Macadamian is before we can get into the meat of this?
Sure. Macadamian is a software design development company based in Ottawa. As you said, our headquarters are in Ottawa, but we've office in California too, in Eastern Europe. And essentially, if you're a company that creates mobile apps, for instance, and you need anything from the initial design ideas through to actually getting it at the door, we can provide those services.
So most apps, I believe, are on this thing that I call the race to zero, right? Especially premium applications. I mean, freemium starts at zero and then goes up, which is a
Yeah.
great thing. Premium apps start at a price, and then what ends up happening is that it eventually falls down to free, right? That is exactly what happens. So the importance of a premium application is really in the first 4 or 5 days around launch, right? That is when you're going to make the most money. You are going to ride high on the charts. You are going to generate if your product is good, and we're assuming that it is. And if it isn't, you should call Macadamian to make sure that they can help you make a good product out of this and make sure that it's functional. But we assume that it's good. So you launch the product and people are going to buy the product and you're going to go up the charts. And this is the perfect thing. But as quickly as you go up those charts, you start to fall down. I call that the trough of despair, right? When you're at the peak and you're like, yes, we've done something. And then it just starts to plummet off and it's a steep fall. Most app developers then look at the price and say, look, if I drop it from $1.99 to 99 cents, I'll get a second lift. And it usually happens right. Now you've cut your revenue in half, but you get another lift and you get exposed to more people and you make some more money. But then eventually, very quickly, you start to fall again. The second trough of despair. It's even more depressing than the first one. And then you are left with absolutely nothing. So 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks down the road, you're relegated to the dustbin, the has-been app. You turn it to zero, the price to zero, and then you turn your attention to a brand new application. So all of the effort, sometimes 16, 18, 24 weeks, of development goes into 4, 5, 6 weeks of as much revenue as you can generate. And this is on average for the applications, but almost 90% of them relegated to the dustbin, back down to zero, onto the next app. It's a very, very, very hard cycle. And that is what I look at. I think there's pain there when it comes to premium. It is not easy, as you said, Scott. Not easy at
No,
all.
it's pain, and I think it goes to you have a implicit, well, pretty explicit business model actually there, right? You're not packaging a whole bunch of services. You're not selling your company. You're giving a dessert, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
And the person's just, okay, this is great, and then it's gone. We're on to the next thing, and it's probably the toughest one to win at because in a way, businesses thrive and survive because of value propositions that have legs, right? And by definition, almost if you're doing that, the value proposition doesn't have legs, right? And there's nothing to build on. Right?
What are some of the examples of there's got to be, we talked about Camera Plus. Camera Plus is a perfect example. The app you get on the phone is an adequate, camera. They managed to succeed and drive great millions of dollars in revenue through this model. So are there certain characteristics that we should be looking at in these apps for an app? If you're thinking of building or if you're thinking of charging for it, is there a checklist that we can run through very quickly that says this is what works? These are the apps that should be premium. These over here, not so much.
Yeah, it's really tricky to discern the difference between what people. You need something that's valued, but you need it in freemium or premium, right? And what pushes that value over the edge? But in terms of a user experience, there's definitely similar things you'll see in premium apps that are successful. I'll kind of pull games out of it. They're a bit of a different story. So one thing is we already talked about that. I get what this thing is right away. Right? There's a clear utility to this, right? Something that actually allows me to do something I couldn't do before, right? And this is old. You said premium's the old model. Well, this is the old software model, right? I bought things that had utility that I couldn't do otherwise, and that's still true, right? It's got to be simple in terms of all the things that go around the user experience besides using it. So installing it, upgrading if I need to, getting support, etc. Fortunately, a lot of this stuff is a lot easier than it used to be. downloading it and installing it has thankfully been made pretty simple by Marketplace and the stores. So I think those are key things. And the other thing I'd say that's true for these things, and you've kind of said it implicitly too, it's very clearly focused, right? It's focused in terms of, because no app's successful that's bloated in features and mobility. We've had this conversation so many times, right? You can't just give a million things out and hope it's going to work. You've got to be very focused and understand your users, understand their context, and understand the value. Somewhere in there is a magic that pushes you over. And usually it's pushing you over from something you're already familiar with, like the Camera Plus one.
So astute. I mean, those are great examples, and I love the fact that, in order to be successful when it comes to building an application like this, you also have to think about the context with which it's being used in. And I'm talking about small screen, like a smartphone, versus tablet. So, an on-the-go experience versus a lean-back experience. And numbers suggest this, that when you're in a hurry, you spend less money. When you're sitting back and relaxing, you spend more money, right?
Yep.
So the opportunity is to tailor the application for the experience that you want, and don't just assume that whatever you do on the iPhone or the smartphone or will work on a tablet the same way. They are drastically different experiences. Any insight that we can talk about that, the difference between the two, and how we can extract as much revenue, which is what it is about, if you're in this model, from both platforms?
Yeah, so I think those are great examples of the difference in the experience between, so you're just going to remember two things about the difference between tablets and smartphones, for instance. It's less space and less time, right? I spend more time on the tablet than on a phone, partly because I'm interrupted, partly because of the nature of how I interact with it. There is literally less space, right? So I can't stuff as much functionality and information on there. And to your point, right, there's a natural transition or model people make on, less space, less time, less money, right? More space, more time, more money, right? It's just driven in that there's a relation between that and value and what I'm willing to spend. So you should probably you potentially at least could charge more for your iPad or Android or BlackBerry or whatever you're using for your tablet than you could for a smartphone.